I had multiple different heroes, and some of my heroes are still them today. Like, I personally call my father one of my heroes of my life because he taught me how to be a man and how to actually take care of a family. But when I was a kid, I had like a real hero. I mean, like, have you ever had like a real hero when you were growing up? Like, they could do no harm. I mean, Robin Hood was my hero, and not like the fake one. I mean, like the real one. Like, this Robin, I mean, he was my hero when I was growing up as a kid. Everything that I wanted to do revolved around how Robin Hood would do it, even so much so that as I was growing up, one of the things that I asked for Christmas was a bow and arrow, because I figured that as a kid, I could do good like Robin Hood, right? So I asked my parents if I could get one, and of course, being very wise and studious parents, they flat out told me no. But what they failed to do is they failed to take me out of Boy Scouts. And when in Boy Scouts, there was this competition, and that if you hit this target 5 times in a row, you got to win a bow and arrow. So with all of my determination and everything that was inside of me, I determined that day that that was going to happen. And sure enough, it did. 5 arrows straight into that target. I walked home a happy boy. Next day, I remember it clear as day. I got up, not early, but up, and went to the backyard, and I put a target up against the fence. And where we lived at the time was in England, and there was these really tall, high hedges that were behind our fence. And I figured that, if I just take the target and tie it to the fence and shoot my arrows into the target, then the actual hedge would stop my arrows. I mean, that makes logical sense to like an 8 and 9-year-old. Amen, somebody? Like, come on. And so as I'm back there, I fired the first one and it goes right through. And I'm like, okay, like that's good, Fire the next couple. They go right in. And I walk up to the fence and I'm looking into the fence and looking into the hedge and I don't see them. And I'm like, oh no, I got to find these. I mean, like this is important to me. I got to learn how to be Robin Hood. So I get out of the fence, go around the houses to the back. And as I walk around the back of the houses, I see this cop car sitting in the distance, because not only did my arrows go through the target, through the fence, through the hedge, across the road, and into the side of the hill that was on the other side, it also missed the cop car for about 10 feet. So, needless to say, my Robin Hood adventures were over at that time, and my parents wisely took that away from me. I mean, because the other game we would play is stand still, shoot it straight up, and see what happens. Hey, come on, anybody? No? I'm the only one? Yeah, okay, at least one more person. All right? So, the trick is you don't move, just in case you ever want to do it, right? The wind blows it, you just don't stand still, okay. But heroes of old, this is what we're going to go into over the next 4 weeks. We're going to talk about some Old Testament heroes, people that showed up out of nowhere to do things that God called them into so that lives would change for the betterment, not just of themselves, but for someone else. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, it talks about this journey, this thing that, like this life that we're on, that as we take every step in our daily lives, that we are surrounded by this crowd of witnesses that literally are cheering us on, that are rooting us to take the next steps forward. It says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us run. We got any runners in here? Anybody? Amen. This is my kind of church. I'm just telling you because it says this in Proverbs chapter 28, verse 1. The wicked run when no one's chasing them. So if you see them out there running, you know what's going on. I'm just telling you. I mean, it's biblical here, people. I'm just letting you point to this. One time in my life, I got asked to do one of these crazy races, one of these, tough mudders, one of these kind of things. So my friend, they asked me to go do the Warrior Dash with them. So it was me and him and his wife and my wife, and we decided that together as a team, we were going to run this thing. We were going to get through the mud, and we were going to get ourselves all hyped up and ready to run this Warrior Dash. And so, no joke. So we get to the front of the line, and they let you out in these big chutes. And there's this guy that was like right next to me, and 2 or 3 others that were with him. And the reason why I knew they were with him is they're all wearing tutus, and they're all kind of looking like this. And no joke, the gentleman was older, and he had this rainbow tube socks all the way up to his knees, and he had this rainbow tutu around his waist, and I told myself, I have to beat him. I don't have to beat anybody else. My wife can beat me, my friends can beat, I just have to beat him, right? Somebody, a little bit, right? Like, I cannot lose to this individual. This is not going to happen to me. And so, my buddy and I, we see him, we're kind of giggling, we're making a little fun jokes, and I can't believe he's doing this, and we get in the middle of the race, and we take off. Man, we run. There's no way this guy is going to get in front of us. So we hit our first obstacle, we climb over the wall, we get our wives over the wall, we're moving. Next one, when we get in the mud and have to go through some water, and then now you're like the mud and the water's like in your shoes. And if you ever ran with mud and water in your shoes, you run a little slower, like your feet get heavy and your legs get tired. And so we're moving along. We're about 3/4 of the way done with the race, and we're doing this stomach crawl through all this mud and this barbed wire that's hanging across us. And my shirt gets caught and just kind of moving. And as I'm moving, I look. It's the old man with the rainbow tutu. I tell you what, I got so much energy. I got so excited. I got through that barbed wire so quickly. I got up to my feet. I was ready to run to the next obstacle. Then I realized something. I was tired. I was tired. I was ready to be done. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in a race and somebody has come up next to you and they ran up next to you and they try to give you some encouragement in the middle of you sweating and hurting and you're tired, and they just, hey, good job, keep it up. And you just want to punch them in their throat because they're like, no, you don't, be quiet. You don't talk to me that way. I'm doing everything I possibly can to get to the finish line. And this old man in this tutu runs up right next to me. Hey, how you doing? And he runs right by. You know what? I tell you what, running a race in this life, it takes courage. It takes courage to wake up every day, to go after the things that we need to go after, the things that are in front of us, to be good parents and to be good husbands and wives. It takes things out of us to be a good nurse and to step into some of the fiery chaos of our daily lives. It takes stuff out of us to deal with customers on a daily basis that all they want is a good deal and all you want to do is not lose your job. This life, it's tough at times. And if we're not careful, if we don't hold on to the truth of who Jesus is and how to live a life that's after something that's more than us, we can get caught up in the chaos of us, our lives, our things. And we lose the perspective of how to live this life with a hero mentality, that there are people that are around you that look to you as their hero, and you might never know it. The way you act with people, the way you talk to people, the way you hold your cool in the middle of the storm. The way you teach and the way that you talk and the way that you love is unlike certain things that people know. And when they see it come out of you, they look to you as though you have something inside of you that they want. To me, those are marks of a hero. And every single one of us has the ability to be a hero in our lives. And today we're going to look at the life of Moses. You might be familiar with the life of Moses. I don't know about you, but you ever watched the 10 Commandments and when growing up, maybe as a kid, and you got that Moses, 10 Commandment voice or whatever that came out of the clouds, right? Every time I think of Moses, for some reason, I think of that voice, and I don't know. I'm wondering if God's voice is even like that. Maybe it's deeper. Maybe it shakes the earth when he talks. I have no idea, but thinking of Moses' life, it reminds me that we have certain things that we can choose from his life to point at, that these are some traits of a hero that you and I can take and actually apply to our lives. When Moses was born, he was no ordinary child. His mother and his father looked at him and knew that there was something special about him, that he was made on purpose and that he was unique and that he was different than everybody else. But at that time, Pharaoh had cast this epic thing throughout the land that said that the fear of the Israelites was going to drive him to kill off the young men of the generation. And so he sent out this decree that said that all of the boys ages 4 and under were to be put to death so that they would not outnumber the Egyptians. Though the king put this rule out there, Moses, his mom, and dad made a decision to take the baby and hide it for 3 months, and then did something spectacular that every parent should possibly do. They took their kid and threw it in the river. Seriously, this is what happened. I mean, think about it. They took their kid, they put it on a boat, they hid it in the reeds, and they hoped. They hoped that the boat would float, that the water wouldn't carry it away, and that somebody would discover it. They hoped that God would show up. Though they had a plan, and though they kind of made it work, it was still up to God to bring it to fruition. Now, I don't think you should throw your kids in the river, but every once in a while they do need a bath. Moses' parents, they took Moses out and they put him in the middle of the reeds. And when they put him there, they knew that the daughter of Pharaoh would come out at a certain time and that she would bathe and she would take care of herself. And they were hoping that she would hear the cry of this little one. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. She saw this little baby. She had mercy on it and became its hero. She rescued Moses from the reeds, brought her in from the riverbank into the king's table. Gave him everything that he would ever need in life. But knowing that she wouldn't be the one to take care of it properly, gave Moses back to his mom and dad, not knowing who they were. Moses grew up with a background and knowledge of who God was and what the law was and what God had done through Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And Moses grew up in the household of both the king and the Jew. And he got the best of both worlds, the love and the care of the parents, but also the education and the money and the wealth that came from being a part of the king's table. Here's hero point number 1. For Moses' mom and dad, they had to abandon safe and live by faith. I wonder what are some things in your lives that you're holding on to, thinking that you're the only one that can do it. You're the only one that can bring safety to this child. You're the only one that can make it. And what God is doing is God is saying to you specifically that you need to take your hands off of it. Abandon the safety of what you consider is safe and start to live by faith. Maybe that's in your finances. Maybe God's saying, stop it, stop it, stop it. Stop holding it so tight. Let me help you by guiding it. Maybe that's in your workplace. Maybe you're trying to move things forward in your workplace, but you feel like every step you take forward, there's 2 to 3 steps that are taken back, and it's because you've got your hands so tightly in it that God's just asking you to, hey, just let go and let me have it. Maybe that's in your parenting. Maybe it's in your marriage. I don't know. But for us to begin to live a life like a hero, we first have to realize that we need to let go. We need to abandon the safety and live by faith in our lives and trust that the God of all the universe has a better plan for your life than what you do. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 10, we read a section of story that comes out from the life of Moses. Moses growing up in the king's house and having all the favor of Pharaoh around him, got himself into a pickle. He got himself to a point in life where he walked outside and saw the normality of life happening, that the Egyptians were putting their hardships on the Hebrews, and he saw someone take advantage of one of his brothers. Probably something that he saw on a constant basis, but for some reason, his spirit woke up during this one. And he took matters into his own hands, and he ended up killing an Egyptian and burying and hiding him, thinking that when he did it, nobody else paid attention and nobody else saw it. Unbeknownst to him, others did see it. And the next day when he was out and he was moving around, somebody else decided to do a mistreat and got into an argument. And Moses stepped in and said, hey, you shouldn't do that. And they said, what are you going to do? You're going to kill me like you did the other guy? And Moses got scared and he ran. He ran into the middle of the desert, ran away from the calling that God had on his life, ran away from being an ordinary child, and just flat out ran away. See, I think for some of us, we're in the middle of running away. I mean, God has called you to step up to the plate, to do something so miraculous and so new and so different in your lives that you don't really know exactly what that means to take hold of that, but you're just running away from it because it scares you to death. You know, it just scares me to death, God, that you would ask me to do something so big and so grand and so beyond me that the comprehension of what you're asking me to do doesn't truly make sense. And, you know, God, I'm not comfortable with that, Lord. You know, I'm not comfortable doing that. I'm good just showing up, sitting down, and allowing it to happen, and I get to be involved in it. I don't want to lead it. I don't want to shake somebody's hand. I don't want to teach a kid in kids' ministry. I don't want to set up. I don't want to tear down. I don't want to do any of that. I'm just good. I just want to be here. And besides, you got people to do that. I mean, it'll happen. I mean, Madison and the band, I mean, they show up every single Sunday and they do an amazing job, do they not? They lead us into the presence of God every single week. And they allow us to have an encounter with the living God, not just because they're playing an instrument, but because they're giving. They're giving of themselves, of their time, of their energies. They're pouring out their hearts and their souls because they truly believe what the Bible says, that God inhabits the praises of his people. And as we come together and as we unify as a body of church and they lead us into the presence of God, they do it because God has equipped them. God has called them. God has allowed them to help us meet him. You know, the Bible says where the presence are two or more witnesses, he's there. Well, God's always there. He's not limited by two witnesses. He's infinite. He's all-knowing. He's all-powerful. He's always there. But in the presence of the body of believers, when we come together, when we say that we actually believe that Jesus is alive and that we can believe in him, he equips us to do even more. Moses, in the midst of his running away, ran away, but God supplied for him. And I wonder what you're running away from. I wonder if God's pushing it on your heart that maybe you're running away from standing here or playing that. Or standing out there and saying hello. Or serving at the soup kitchen downtown at that 180 place. Or helping out your neighbor who can't push the lawnmower across the grass anymore. What's God pushing you into? What's God nudging you into today that maybe you've been running away from? Maybe it's time for you to stop running and to find a home. So Moses found a home. It says here in Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 10, it reads this way. It says, now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Hey, don't get this, don't lose this really quick. This was normal, that fires would pop up around the desert all the time. I mean, it's a dry place. If there was no water there, things would combust, and there would be flames, and there would be smoke, and there would be random fires all over the place in the desert. But this fire was a little different. And this fire was from God. And when the fire of God falls on something, it'll do whatever it wishes. It'll burn it, or it won't consume it. And I believe that in all of us, there's a little bit of that fire of God that rests deep down in our souls. And I'm wondering that if that flame, is it consuming you? Is it burning you? Is it hindering you? Is it helping you? Is it coming alive? Or have we done what we do constantly in our world, and maybe we've actually pushed that flame down a little bit too much? Maybe for some of us, we've put it out and said, no, God, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, Lord, that was a dream for me a long time ago. There's no way that you could use me now. There's no way, God, that you could allow me to step into this newness of life, this new thing. I'm too old. I'd have to go back to school. I'd have to do this and do that. And we come up with all these different excuses to push the barrier of what God wants us to do and what God has called us to do farther and farther away from us. And we get into a position kind of like Moses, where we run out of what the king had for us, and we end up becoming shepherds. I bet you that when Moses' mom and dad looked at him at 3 months old and said that this is no ordinary child, that they did not bank on the fact that he was going to be a shepherd. No parent ever dreams that their child is going to wake up and be the least of these on the totem pole of society. No parent ever wishes that they cannot supply what's going to be better for their children than that was for them. I mean, I remember growing up as a kid that I told myself that I'm going to make sure that my family is not going to be the way that my family was in certain areas. I'm going to make sure that we have the money that we need and that we can provide the way that we needed to provide it. Now, I had a good life growing up. My parents took care of me. They were good examples. I truly say this with all my heart when I say that my dad is my hero. But I also truly believe that when we run away from things in this life, we run into something that God didn't intend you for. God uses the situation for Moses because he became a shepherd of the sheep. But God didn't intend Moses to be a shepherd. God intended Moses to be a leader. Somebody that was going to lead his people out of the darkness of Egypt. It continues to read this way. It says, "Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside and looked, God called to him from the midst of the bush, saying, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I." I don't know about you, but if he would have said, Ben, I would have said, where am I? Because I would have been gone. I've been running on the other side of the desert. That wouldn't have wanted me to stay, right? Am I alone? Right? I would not want to have stayed in that moment. That probably would have freaked me out a little bit, and I would not have wanted to be there. But there was something inside of Moses. There was a flame that started to burn a little bit brighter because Moses realized that this was a moment. This was a moment in his life that he wasn't going to walk away from. This is a moment in his life that he was going to come closer to. I believe we all have these moments in our lives, these God moments where God shows up at your doorstep and you said, you know what, I wasn't going to do that today, but God woke me up and God moved me there. And since God woke me up and God moved me there, I'm here. I'm having this moment today, this moment where I can meet him, this living God, the God of the universe, the God that is both the beginning and the end, the Alpha and the Omega, the one who created it all and created you and I on purpose and specifically for this moment. Moses steps into the moment. I believe we have these moments all the time in our lives, that God is literally calling us into something that is bigger and greater than us. Here's our hero point number 2, that we always have to answer the call. If you want to be a hero in this life, you always have to be ready to answer the call. You never know when God's going to ask you to do something that's bigger than you. That he asks you to step out beyond your comfort zone, to literally push Moses into a position that makes him uncomfortable. But I truly believe that in society today, especially in our world today and in Christianity today, that we've kind of perverted what this word calling means. that we've shifted it and kind of messed it up a little bit. So like, what is a calling? What does that mean? Well, first of all, know this. When we go back to the rule of the first, and we go back into the Bible and we look at when God calls, the first time God ever called anything was he called it to be light and dark. He called it into existence. He made it happen. God just wasn't playing around when he made it the earth for you and I to inhabit it. He made it on purpose. And when God speaks, who are we to reverse it? The Bible says in Numbers chapter 23, verse 11, that when God acts, nobody can reverse it. If he says it's going to be so, it is so, i.e., he's God. So what is it for us? What is a calling for you and I? This is what I truly believe in, three simple things. The first one is this, is that God has grabbed your attention regarding your future in him. God's grabbed your attention. You didn't just read it on a billboard sign and thought that would be a good idea. God literally grabbed your attention. He said, hey, you can do this. You can make a difference in this society. People need to hear the words that are inside of you. You've got insight like no one else does. God needs you and I to partner with him so that people don't just hope to see the magnificent glory of Jesus Christ, but that they can see it in the practical life of you and I. That as we breathe and as we work and as we go step by step, God can show up in all of those things. What is it that God has grabbed your attention about? Here's the second one. You begin to become what you aren't yet. I never wanted to be a pastor. I didn't grow up in the church. I never desired to be a pastor. I was scared to talk in front of people. You can ask my wife. I hated this idea. When God said that this is what you were going to do, I said, yeah, right. I mean, who in the world is going to have an ex-con that's divorced ever going to lead a church? That just doesn't make sense. What denomination is going to say, yeah, give him some money, help him to go do that? That doesn't make sense. But I love a God that doesn't make sense. Because in the world that we live in, if we live in such a strict society to play it safe with everything, that if we don't begin to live our lives by faith, we'll never truly be able to see what God has in store for us. You begin to become what you aren't yet. And God begins to work on you in ways that you never thought you would. You begin to make things happen in your life. You begin to create it and you begin to do it. You get to taste and see that the Lord is good in whatever he's calling you into. That there'll be a difference in your life because of his prompting on your heart. And then from there'll be a difference in someone else's life. I'm not a pastor for myself. I believe anybody can do this. I believe God can equip anyone to go along this journey. But I do believe that God has specific things in store for each one of you. And the question today is, are you running from it or are you running to it? And Moses had a moment. Moses had a moment where he had to literally come into the midst of what it was going to be for him. The third part about this, is that the calling then starts to become clear. You ever hear somebody say this? I was born for this. I was born to do this. This is why God made me. I honestly now can tell you, over years of being in this position and years of going through everything in my life, I was born for this. Not that I'm the greatest at this, but I was born for this. God made me specifically for this. And he made you specifically for the things that are in front of you. Nobody else cares like you care. Nobody else loves the way that you love. Nobody else does what you do. God made you on purpose, and he put a calling in your life the same way he put a calling in Moses' life. From the day Moses was born, he was no ordinary child. And I'm here to tell you today that you are no ordinary being. There is none like you. God knit you together so specially, he did not make a mistake when he made you. He made a miracle. And maybe you need to hear that today. that your life is not a mistake. And the things that are going on around you right now are for your greatness, not for your gloom. God desires for great things to happen and for great things to come out of you. You were born for it. You were born to do the thing that God is calling you to do. Look at this in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. It says this: by faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born, because they saw that he was no ordinary child. For they were not afraid of the king's edict. There are things that are around you that are going on in your world that are trying to quiet down the flame of God inside of your life. There's rules and obligations. There's things that are out there, even within our own families, that if we begin to talk about religion or if we begin to talk about something else that's pushing our future forward, that they'll try to quiet us down. They'll tell you you're not good enough and there's no way you can do it. You don't have the right education. There's no way that you can step up to the plate and actually do what God's calling you to do because God's got somebody else to do it. And you know what? We believe it. We believe it. I don't have the education. I can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I can't do it. I don't have the ability. I can't do it. Moses had a decision to make in his life in this moment, that he was either going to step into what God had for him or he was going to fight it and say, no, God, I can't do it. In fact, he actually did that. I mean, if you fast forward into the story, God's telling him, I've got this great thing that I want you to go do, and we're going to read about it. But after it's all done and said so, he looks at God and he says, hey, isn't there someone else? You sure you didn't make a mistake? You sure I'm the one that needs to go to Pharaoh? I don't talk very well. And he started to come up with all these different excuses of why the call that on his life, the call that God put on his life, the tugging of the heartstrings that God had done for him in his life were not good enough. That's like saying to Jesus when he was hanging on your cross, like, you know what, I know you're dying for me, and I know the blood that's coming out of you is to cover my sins, both my past, my present, and my future. And I know that you're going to resurrect from the dead, but, could you do it just one more time for me? I mean, could you just come down and then go back up? Can I just see it a little bit more for me? Moses is having this moment with God, and I believe we have this moment with God a lot in our lives, where we need God to show up just a little bit more. But that calling that God has put inside of you, hear me, he's the one that put it there. You didn't dream it. You didn't come up with it. It wasn't just something you watched on TV. God's got something inside of you. There's a reason why it's burning inside of you that you need to go do it, that your hands need to be a part of it. What's God calling you to run to? And continues to say this in Exodus chapter 3. Then he said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for this place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows. Isn't it great that we have a God that knows what we go through? That he knows our sorrows? But back it up. It's not only that he knows our sorrows, he knows exactly where we live. And he knows our bosses, and he knows our neighbors, and he knows the pain that we go through, and he knows the burdens that we carry. He knows your address and your phone number and how many hairs are upon your head. He knows how tall or how small you are. He knows the eye color that you carry. He knows the slur in your voice. He knows you. And we serve a God who cares about what's going on. That he shares in your pain. That he feels your frustrations. He cares about you. He cared so much about his people that were stuck in this bondage, that were getting beaten and beat up by the world that was around them. That he found somebody that would listen to the call that he was going to put in their hearts. He says this, "So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the land and to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, and all the other ites you could throw in there." God has a desire to take them to a place that they've never been. And God has a desire to take you to a place that you've never been. And a place that maybe you think you should go, or maybe you think that God's pushing you, but yet you don't know. Because you have a heart to change something. You have a heart to do something. And that something is the thing that God put inside of you. It's not something that maybe you just went to school for. It's that thing that only you have inside of you. It continues to say this, "Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Have you ever thought that the hero inside of you is not for you? And God is calling you to do something that isn't going to give you any accolades. That's not going to put your name in lights. And you're not going to hold up a plaque that says you did well. But you might be the key to release somebody from a prison or from a doom or from a past that they're holding on to. Because they can see the light that's inside of you. And they can hear that you went through it. It says in Revelations that we overcome the evil one. We overcome the devil. We overcome the pain of this world with this way. By the word of our testimony and by the blood of the Lamb. God's called you and I to be heroes in this world. To step up to the plate, to do something miraculous, something that nobody else could do in this life. Here's hero point number 3. That we have to be careful that as we go through our daily lives, that we avoid being satisfied with today. God has called you and I to greatness, and we can't become satisfied with just the moment of what's happening. This is what happened to Moses. Moses in Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, it says this, that one day after Moses had grown up, hear me, grown up, many years of watching this happen, many years of neglecting the call of God on his life, many years of pushing the flame and the fire down, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. This isn't the first time Moses saw this, but it is the first time he decided to do something about it. And maybe God has prompted you many times to go and to do something that he's pulled on your heartstrings about. But maybe today is the day that you actually decide to do something about it. To go after something bigger. Here's point number 4. We have to be careful. Like Moses, we have to be careful not to fall in the trap of the past. Now, Moses had an encounter with God. The bush is burning. It's happening right there in front of him. God is showing up. And Moses has a choice to keep his shoes on or to take them off. Because his shoes in this moment represent the identity that he's holding on to. Moses was a murderer. He abandoned ship and ran away. He mistreated his own people. He pushed people aside just so that he could get the glory in the moment that where he was. And God called him in this moment, Moses, it's time for you to take off your shoes. It's time for you to take off the identity of the past. For I have called you into something new and to something great. Will you take off your shoes? Will you not rely on what was, but what is? It says this in Isaiah chapter 43, verse 18 through 19. It says, forget what has happened. Don't keep going over the old history. Don't play it over and over in your head. Don't give excuses to why God has not called you from the past into the present and into the future. Don't hold on to this ball and chain that's keeping you locked down because you don't feel like you're good enough. And there's no way that you're going to succeed in this world because of the things that I've done in the past are holding me down. No, they're holding you down if you don't forget about them. If you don't take and turn them over to God. Be alert, be present. I'm about to do something brand new. Listen, brand new. Never done in your life before. It's never happened before to you. And when things are new, they're either exciting or we're scared of them. Moses had a moment. And I pray right now you're having a moment. That God's messing with you. And maybe he wants you to let go of the old and hold on to the new. To do something brand new in your life. To make a difference in this world and the world that's around you. Because God's going to do something brand new if you let him have the past. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I am making roads through the desert, rivers in the Badlands. One of the biggest things that holds us back from letting go of the identity of our past and walking into the new is that we have to make a decision that we will refuse to be defined by others. Listen, I know others can see my story. I know others can hear my testimony, and I know others love to do these things. We love to slap labels on people, and unfortunately, we like to believe them. But I mean, catch this. Moses, his label was that he was just he was the son of the daughter of Pharaoh. That was all he was going to be, that he was not going to live up to anything else. Noah, this man built a huge boat in his backyard. Everybody thought he was nuts. Nobody thought that what he was doing was actually going to glorify God at all. They thought he was crazy. And they'll think you're crazy too. Rebecca, woman who was barren, did not have children, but out of the graciousness and the generosity of her heart, God used her not only to birth more of the nation of Israel, but to do great things through her. Through the generosity of what she had at her hands and how she continued to give it out so that God could get the glory. David, who are you, shepherd boy, to go against that giant? Do you not realize that he's a great warrior? Do you not realize that you're only a shepherd with a sling? There's no way you're going to accomplish this. Jesus, aren't you just a carpenter's son? What do you mean you're going to save the world? There are kings that are around us in every aspect of our lives. There's kings that sit on thrones that are our bosses. There's kings that sit on thrones that are presidents and people that rule municipalities and things throughout the government of the world. And people that we look to in our lives to help define us. But my question to you is this: what king is defining you today? What king are you listening to today in your life? I mean, God is calling us to abandon safe and live by faith. He's calling you and I to push away the definition of what society is telling you that you are. That you're not good enough. That you're not pretty enough. That you're too old or you're too young. That you're not gifted enough. There's no way you're going to be able to do it. Hey, for the longest time in my life as a pastor, I thought that I was good depending on what I said. If it rhymed, if it made sense, if I got paid to do it, if you actually showed up or not. But truth be told, I'm defined by Him. That I'm a child of God, the living King, who made me on purpose and for a reason bigger than myself. And He did the same for you, because there's none like you. And God's calling you to be a hero today in this world for the people that are around you. Because we all have the marks of faith in our lives. But are you ready? Are you ready to abandon the safe and live by faith? Will you pray with me? Father, I thank you for today. God, I thank you that we get to look back at the life of Moses, and I thank you, God, that we're able to come to you in the frailty of who we are, in the majesty of who you are. That we can lean on you, God, for all of the great and mighty things that you can do in our lives. And so, Father, I pray right now for the stirring of our hearts. God, what have you called us to that we need to pay attention to in our lives? That we need to abandon the safety net of our jobs, that we need to abandon the safety net of our incomes, that we need to abandon the safety net of our lives, and we need to begin to walk out this faith for you and for your glory. God, I pray right now, Lord, that you will stir our hearts and our minds, that we can truly be connected to what you're calling us into. And Father, would you not just call us there, God, but would you give us the courage? Would you give us the courage to make the steps, to do the next thing? Father, would you walk with us as you call us to do more? In Jesus' name.